The water was ankle-deep and rising when Tessa Summers realized her Saturday morning had officially become a disaster. She stood in her tiny kitchen, watching the puddles spread across the linoleum floor, her phone clutched in one hand while the other frantically twisted the valve under the sink that refused to budge. The pipe had burst without warning, spraying water everywhere before she'd managed to slow it to a steady leak. Her landlord wasn't answering, and every plumber she'd called was either booked solid or charging emergency rates that would drain her already pathetic bank account. Come on," she muttered, scrolling through her contacts until she found a crumpled business card she'd photographed months ago. Riley's Plumbing, it said. Her coworker had sworn by them. She squinted at the number, trying to make out the smudged digits, and quickly typed what she hoped was correct before hitting dial. The phone rang 3 times. "Hello." The voice was deep, smooth, and decidedly not what she expected from a plumber at 8 in the morning. "Oh, thank God," Tessa breathed, pushing her wet hair out of her face. "I need someone right now. My kitchen pipe burst and there's water everywhere and I've called everyone but nobody can come until Monday and I really need help." There was a pause. "I think you might have the wrong number." No, please," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "This is Riley's Plumbing, right? The card says Riley's Plumbing. Are you closed on weekends? Can you please make an exception? I'll pay extra." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Where are you located?" Tessa rattled off her address, a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better decades. She heard what sounded like movement on the other end, maybe footsteps. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, the voice said. "Really? Oh my God, thank you so much. How much do you charge?" "I mean, I don't have a ton of money, but I can figure something out. We'll worry about that later. Just try to turn off your main water valve if you can find it." "I don't know where that is," Tessa admitted, feeling helpless. "Check your bathroom or near the entrance." "I'll show you when I get there. 20 minutes. He hung up before she could ask anything else. Tessa stared at her phone, relief flooding through her despite the absurdity of the situation. A plumber who made house calls this fast on a Saturday morning. She wasn't going to question her luck. She spent the next 15 minutes frantically mopping up water and shoving towels around the base of the sink. Her apartment was embarrassingly small, and she was suddenly very aware of the dishes in the sink, the pile of laundry on her couch, and the romance novel splayed open on her coffee table. Not that a plumber would care, but still. When the knock came, she practically sprinted to the door, yanking it open without checking the peephole. The man standing in her doorway was not what she expected. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair that looked professionally styled even though it was Saturday morning. He wore jeans and a black Henley that fit him like it had been tailored, and his hands, which she'd expected to be rough and stained, looked like they'd never touched a wrench in their life. His eyes were a striking gray blue, and they were currently taking in her soaked pajama pants and oversized college sweatshirt with what might have been amusement. "Hi," he said. "I'm Quinn." "Tessa," she managed, stepping aside. "Thank you so much for coming. You're a lifesaver." Quinn walked in, his eyes immediately going to the kitchen where water was still seeping across the floor. He moved with purpose, setting down a toolbox she hadn't noticed he was carrying. It looked new, like he'd just bought it. "Show me the leak," he said. Tessa led him to the sink, pointing at the pipe underneath. "It just burst. I tried to turn it off, but the valve is stuck, and I don't know what I'm doing." Quinn crouched down, his shoulder brushing against her leg as he examined the situation. Tessa stepped back, suddenly very aware of how close they were in the cramped space. She watched as he reached for the valve, his hands strong and sure despite her earlier assessment. With what seemed like minimal effort, he twisted it, and the leak stopped. That valve was probably corroded, he said, standing up. The whole fitting needs to be replaced. Do you have a main water shutoff? I don't know, Tessa admitted again. Quinn looked around the apartment, then walked toward the bathroom. Tessa followed, watching as he opened the small closet near the entrance and found the valve immediately. He turned it, and she heard the water pressure die throughout the apartment. "You're really good at this," she said. "I mean, I guess you would be. It's your job." He glanced at her, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. "I've picked up a few things over the years." Quinn returned to the kitchen and opened his toolbox. Tessa hovered nearby, unsure whether to offer help or stay out of the way. She settled for making coffee, which seemed like the polite thing to do for someone who'd rushed over to save her apartment. "You take coffee?" she asked. "I know it's early and you probably have other calls." "Coffee would be great," Quinn said, not looking up from where he was examining the pipe. "And you're my only call today. Really. Business must be slow." Something like that. Tessa poured 2 mugs and brought one over, setting it on the counter within his reach. Quinn had removed the damaged fitting and was measuring something with a tape measure. His movements were methodical, careful. She found herself watching the way his hands worked, the concentration on his face. "So do you work for Riley's Plumbing, or are you Riley?" she asked, trying to make conversation. Quinn paused for just a second. "I'm covering for them today." "That's nice of you. Do you own your own company?" "I work in acquisitions," he said, which wasn't really an answer. "I need to run out and get a replacement part. This fitting is pretty old." "Will you be okay for 20 minutes? "Of course," Tessa said quickly. "I really appreciate this." Quinn stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. He picked up his coffee and took a long drink, his eyes meeting hers over the rim of the mug. "This is good coffee." "Thanks. It's literally the only thing I'm good at in the kitchen, so that's something." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. "I doubt that's true." After he left, Tessa scrambled to clean up the apartment properly. She threw the laundry in her bedroom, did the dishes, and changed into actual clothes, dark jeans and a soft green sweater that one of her friends had insisted made her eyes pop. She told herself it wasn't for Quinn, that it was just embarrassing to be in soggy pajamas, but she still checked her reflection twice. When Quinn returned, he had a small bag from a hardware store and that same unreadable expression. He got to work immediately, and Tessa tried not to stare as he replaced the fitting with practiced efficiency. It took him maybe 30 minutes, and then he was turning the main water back on and checking for leaks. "That should hold," he said, closing the cabinet under the sink. "But you should probably mention to your landlord that the plumbing in this building is pretty outdated. This could happen again." "My landlord doesn't care about anything except getting rent on time," Tessa said with a sigh. "But I'll try. How much do I owe you?" Quinn closed his toolbox and stood, running a hand through his hair. "Don't worry about it." "What? No, I can't not pay you. You came here on a Saturday morning and fixed everything." "Consider it a favor," Quinn said. His eyes held hers, and Tessa felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude. "I don't even know you. You can't just do this for free." "Then let me take you to breakfast," Quinn said. "Payment for the coffee." Tessa blinked. "You want me to pay you in breakfast?" "I want to have breakfast with you," he corrected. "If you're interested." She should have said no. She should have insisted on paying him properly and sent him on his way like a normal person. But there was something about the way he was looking at her, something warm and genuine that made her want to say yes more than she'd wanted anything in a long time. "Okay," she heard herself say, "but somewhere cheap, because I'm still planning to pay you for the plumbing." "Deal," Quinn said, and this time he definitely smiled. They ended up at a diner 3 blocks away, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a laminated menu that offered everything from pancakes to meatloaf. Tessa ordered French toast and eggs, suddenly ravenous. Quinn ordered the same, plus bacon and coffee for both of them. "So," Tessa said once the waitress had left, "acquisitions. What does that mean exactly?" "I help companies buy other companies," Quinn said, which was vague enough to be frustrating. "It's mostly paperwork and meetings." "Pretty boring. But you know how to fix pipes." "My grandfather was a contractor. I spent summers working with him when I was a kid. He believed everyone should know how to fix things themselves." "That's actually really cool," Tessa said. "My dad tried to teach me basic stuff, but I was always too impatient. I just wanted to get back to my books." "You like reading?" "Love it. I work at a bookstore, actually. Brightside Books, over on Maple Street. It's small and the pay is terrible, but I'm surrounded by stories all day, so I can't complain." Quinn's expression softened. "That sounds like a good job." "It is. What about you? Do you like acquisitions?" He considered this for a moment, his fingers turning the coffee mug in slow circles. "It's challenging. I'm good at it, but I'm not sure it's what I'd do if I could do anything." "What would you do?" "Probably something with my hands, building things, fixing things, something real." Their food arrived and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Tessa found herself stealing glances at Quinn, trying to figure him out. He was polite, attentive, but there was something guarded about him, like he was holding back. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "And you can tell me if I'm being nosy. Go ahead." "Why did you answer your phone this morning? If you don't actually work for Riley's Plumbing," Quinn set down his fork, meeting her eyes directly, "because you sounded desperate, and because I could help. That's simple. That's simple." "You're a strange person, Quinn," Tessa said, but she was smiling. "In a good way." "I get that a lot," he said dryly. They talked through the rest of breakfast, the conversation flowing easier than Tessa had expected. Quinn asked about her favorite books, her college experience, what had brought her to the city. She learned that he'd grown up on the East Coast, that he'd gone to business school, that he had a sister who lived overseas and parents who'd retired to Florida. Basic information, but it felt significant somehow. When the check came, they both reached for it. Tessa was faster, but Quinn's hand covered hers, warm and solid. "I've got it," he said. "You fixed my sink for free. I'm buying breakfast. How about we split it?" They compromised, each paying half, and walked back toward Tessa's building together. The morning had warmed up, the sun breaking through the clouds that had threatened rain earlier. Tessa found herself walking slower than necessary, not wanting the morning to end. "This is me," she said when they reached her building. "Thank you again, for everything." "It was my pleasure," Quinn said, and he meant it. "If you have any other problems with the plumbing, call me. Here's my actual number." He pulled out his phone and Tessa rattled off her number. A moment later, her phone buzzed with a text that just said Quinn and a phone emoji. "I'll save this correctly this time," she said, laughing. "Though I'm glad I dialed the wrong number this morning." "Me too," Quinn said softly. They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Tessa wondered if he was going to ask to see her again, wondered if she should be the one to ask. But then Quinn was stepping back, his expression shifting into something more neutral. "Take care, Tessa," he said. "You too." She watched him walk away, tall and confident, and felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. It had been nice, spending the morning with him. More than nice. But maybe that was all it was, a random encounter that would fade into a pleasant memory. Tessa went upstairs and spent the rest of the day trying not to think about Quinn's gray-blue eyes and the way he'd smiled at her across the diner table. She failed miserably. On Monday, she was shelving new arrivals at Brightside Books when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, but when she opened it, the message made her heart skip. "Is your sink still working?" she typed back quickly. "So far so good. Should I be worried? Just checking, making sure my repair job held up. It's holding. You do good work. Thanks. I was thinking about what you said about the bookstore. I'd like to see it sometime. If that's okay." Tessa had to read the message 3 times to make sure she wasn't misunderstanding. She was grinning like an idiot, and her coworker Marcus was definitely noticing. "You're welcome anytime. I work Tuesday through Saturday, usually 9 to 6. I'll stop by this week." She spent the rest of Monday and all of Tuesday in a state of anticipation that was completely ridiculous. Every time the door chimed, she looked up, hoping to see Quinn walking in. But Tuesday came and went with no sign of him, and Wednesday morning started the same way. Then, around 11, the door opened and there he was. Quinn looked different in the daylight streaming through the bookstore windows. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, his hair perfectly styled, and he moved through the space with an easy confidence that made several customers look twice. He found her at the information desk, and his whole face brightened when their eyes met. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Tessa replied, suddenly shy. "You're here." "I said I would be. Is this a bad time?" "No, it's perfect. Do you want a tour?" The bookstore wasn't large, just 2 floors connected by a narrow staircase, but Tessa showed him around like it was a palace. She pointed out the different sections, her favorite displays, the reading nook in the back where they hosted book clubs. Quinn listened attentively, asking questions, picking up books and reading the back covers. He had good taste, gravitating toward literary fiction and biography, though he lingered in the mystery section too. "You should read this," Tessa said, pulling down a thriller that had come out last month. "It's absolutely gripping. I read it in one sitting." Quinn took the book, their fingers brushing. "I'll trust your recommendation." "Let me ring you up," Tessa said, leading him back downstairs to the register. As she scanned the book, Marcus appeared from the back room, his eyes widening slightly when he saw Quinn. "Tessa, Mr. Morrison is on line 2 about the event. Can you take it? I'm with a customer." "Sure thing," Marcus said, but not before shooting her a curious look. Quinn handed her his credit card and Tessa glanced at the name. Quinn Quinlan. She'd been so focused on everything else that she'd never asked his last name. "Quinlan," she said. "That's a good name." "It served me well enough," he said with a hint of amusement. She bagged the book and handed it over, trying to think of a reason to make him stay longer. "So what brought you downtown today, besides the bookstore?" "I had a meeting nearby, thought I'd take my lunch break to come see you." "That's sweet." "Tessa," Quinn said, his voice dropping lower. "Would you want to have dinner with me? A real date, not just splitting a breakfast check." "Yes," she said immediately. "I'd really like that. Friday night, Friday's perfect." They exchanged details, and Quinn left with his book and a smile that stayed with Tessa for the rest of the day. Marcus pounced the moment he was gone. "Who was that?" he demanded. "And why have you been holding out on me?" "His name is Quinn. He fixed my sink on Saturday." "That man is not a plumber," Marcus said flatly. "That suit cost at least $3,000, Tessa. I know because my boyfriend works in fashion." "Who is he really?" "He said he works in acquisitions." "Some kind of business thing." Marcus pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. His eyes went wide. "Tessa, that was Quinn Quinlan. I know, I saw his credit card." "No, you don't understand. Quinn Quinlan, as in Quinlan Enterprises, as in one of the richest men in the state." Tessa felt the ground shift under her feet. "What?" Marcus turned his phone around, showing her a Forbes article with Quinn's picture. The headline read, "Billionaire CEO Quinn Quinlan expands empire with latest acquisition." "He's a billionaire," Tessa whispered. "Not just a billionaire. He's the billionaire. His company owns half the real estate in the city and he just bought out some major tech firm last month. Tessa, what is he doing fixing your sink? I don't know, she said honestly. He answered the phone when I called a plumbing company. I thought he worked for them. And he just went along with it. I guess so. Marcus set his phone down, his expression shifting from shock to concern. Be careful, okay? Guys like that, they don't usually hang around bookstores and fix sinks for fun. He seemed really genuine, Tessa said, but doubt was already creeping in. Why hadn't Quinn told her who he was? Why had he pretended to be just some guy who knew how to fix pipes? She spent the next 2 days overthinking everything. Part of her wanted to cancel the date, to avoid the inevitable heartbreak that came from getting involved with someone so far out of her league. But another part, the part that remembered how easy it had been to talk to him, how his eyes had softened when she talked about books, wanted to give him a chance. Friday arrived too quickly. Tessa changed outfits 4 times before settling on a dark blue dress that was nice enough for a fancy restaurant, but not so fancy that she'd feel ridiculous if he took her somewhere casual. She wore her hair down, put on the lipstick her sister had given her for Christmas, and tried to calm her nerves. Quinn picked her up at 7, driving a sleek black car that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. But when he got out and saw her, his reaction was worth every anxious moment. He stopped, just for a second, and his expression was so openly appreciative that Tessa felt beautiful. "You look incredible," he said. "Thank you. You look pretty good yourself." He did. Dark slacks, a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up, no tie. Sophisticated but relaxed. Quinn opened the car door for her, and they drove to a restaurant on the waterfront that Tessa had heard about but never been able to afford. Inside, the host greeted Quinn by name and led them to a private table by the window with a view of the harbor. The lights of the city reflected off the water, creating a scene so romantic that Tessa almost forgot to be nervous. "This place is beautiful," she said once they were seated. "I hoped you'd like it. They have an excellent wine list if you're interested." "I'm more of a beer person, honestly," Quinn laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face. "They have good beer, too." They ordered drinks and appetizers, falling into conversation as naturally as they had at the diner. But this time, Tessa couldn't ignore the elephant in the room. "Can I ask you something?" she said after the waiter had brought their food. "Of course. Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" Quinn set down his fork, his expression becoming serious. "You know, my coworker recognized you. He showed me the Forbes article." "I see." Quinn was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. "I should have told you. I'm sorry." "I'm not mad," Tessa said quickly. "I'm just confused." "Why did you pretend to be a plumber?" "I didn't pretend to be anything. You called my personal cell phone by mistake. I could have corrected you immediately, but you sounded so desperate and I happened to be free. It seemed easier to just help. But why not tell me afterward?" Quinn met her eyes. "Because you treated me like a normal person. Do you know how rare that is? The moment people find out who I am, everything changes. They want something, or they're intimidated, or they start performing. But you just talked to me about books and your terrible landlord and made good coffee. It was the most real conversation I'd had in months." Tessa absorbed this, her heart softening despite her reservations. "I get that. But Quinn, we're on a date now. We can't build anything real if you're not honest with me." "You're absolutely right. What do you want to know?" "Everything. The real story." So Quinn told her. About growing up with wealth he'd never asked for. About the pressure to take over his father's company. About building his own empire because he'd wanted to prove himself on his own terms. He talked about the loneliness of his position, the constant suspicion that people only wanted to be near him for his money or connections. He was honest about his life in a way that felt vulnerable, and Tessa found herself reaching across the table to take his hand. "That sounds really hard," she said. "It has its perks," Quinn said with a slight smile. "But yeah, sometimes it's hard. For what it's worth, I liked you before I knew you were rich, and I still like you now. The money doesn't change anything for me. That means more than you know." The rest of dinner was perfect. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing bites of their entrees, laughing over dessert. Quinn told her about his sister's adventurous life abroad, about his grandfather who taught him everything about fixing things. Tessa shared stories from the bookstore, about the regular customers she loved and the ones who drove her crazy. By the time they left the restaurant, Tessa felt like she'd known Quinn for years instead of days. He drove her home, walking her to her building's entrance. The streetlights cast shadows across his face, making him look younger somehow. "I had a really great time," Tessa said. "Thank you for dinner." "Thank you for giving me a chance," Quinn replied, "even after finding out I'm not actually a plumber." "You're a plumber with excellent credentials," Tessa teased. "My sink is still working perfectly," Quinn laughed, stepping closer. "Can I see you again? I'd like that. Tomorrow, I work until 6. I'll pick you up from the bookstore. We can do something casual." "Perfect." They stood there, close enough that Tessa could feel the warmth radiating from him. Quinn reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I really want to kiss you right now." "Then why don't you?" Tessa whispered. Quinn leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But she didn't want to. She rose on her toes to meet him halfway, and when their lips finally touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but then Quinn's hand slid to the small of her back, pulling her closer, and Tessa's hands found their way to his chest, feeling his heart racing under her palms. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I should let you go inside." "Probably," Tessa agreed, not moving. "But I don't want to." "Me either." They kissed again, slower this time, sweeter. When Tessa finally pulled away and went inside, she was floating. She touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of Quinn's kiss, and smiled all the way up the stairs. True to his word, Quinn picked her up from work the next day. He was waiting outside when she emerged at 6, leaning against his car in jeans and a blue shirt that matched his eyes. Tessa's heart did a little flip. "Hey," she said, suddenly shy again. "Hey yourself. How was work?" "Long. Better now." They went to a food truck festival by the river, eating tacos and trying different desserts from various vendors. Quinn was completely at ease here, no one recognizing him or treating him differently. They sat on the grass watching the sunset, Quinn's arm around Tessa's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "This is nice," she murmured. "It really is. You do this kind of thing often." "Just hang out like normal people." "Not as much as I'd like. My schedule is pretty demanding." "What does a typical day look like for you?" Quinn considered this. "Meetings, mostly. Conference calls with international partners, reviewing proposals and contracts. It's a lot of decision-making, which gets exhausting. I usually work 12-hour days." "That sounds awful." "It can be, but I'm good at it and I've built something I'm proud of." "What made you want to go into business?" "My dad expected it. And I found I had a talent for seeing potential where others didn't. I can look at a struggling company and know exactly what needs to change to make it profitable. It's like solving a puzzle." "That's actually really cool, even if it means long hours." "What about you?" "Have you always wanted to work in a bookstore?" Tessa shrugged. "I went to school for English literature. Not exactly a lucrative degree. I thought about teaching, but I'm not sure I have the patience for it. The bookstore just felt right." I love recommending books to people. Love that moment when someone finds exactly what they were looking for. You're good at it. That book you sold me is fantastic, by the way. I stayed up until 2 in the morning finishing it. Really? You read it already? Couldn't put it down. You have good taste. They stayed at the festival until it got dark, then walked along the river path, holding hands and talking. Quinn told her about a property development deal that was giving him headaches, and Tessa vented about a customer who'd yelled at her over a book that was out of stock. It was easy, comfortable, like they'd been doing this for months instead of days. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a pattern. Quinn would stop by the bookstore whenever his schedule allowed, sometimes just for 20 minutes to bring Tessa coffee and steal a quick kiss. Other times he'd show up at closing and they'd go to dinner, or for walks, or once to a late-night movie screening that Quinn admitted he'd rented out the entire theater for. "This is insane," Tessa had said, looking around at the empty seats. "You can't just rent out a whole theater." "Why not?" "I wanted to watch a movie with you without interruptions." "You're ridiculous." "You like it." She did. God help her, she really did. A month into their relationship, Quinn invited her to his place for dinner. Tessa had been curious about where he lived, imagining some sterile penthouse downtown. What she found instead was a converted warehouse in an up-and-coming neighborhood, with exposed brick walls, industrial fixtures, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city skyline. "This is not what I expected," Tessa said, walking through the open concept space. The furniture was comfortable and lived in. There were books on the shelves and actual art on the walls, not the generic hotel-style paintings she'd imagined. "What did you expect?" Quinn asked, amused. "I don't know. Something more corporate. This feels like a home." "That's because it is my home. I spend enough time in boardrooms and hotels. I wanted this place to feel different." He'd cooked for her, which was another surprise. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, but he moved around the kitchen with the same confidence he showed when fixing her sink. They ate on the couch, watching the sun set over the city, and Tessa felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't just attraction anymore. She was falling in love with him. "What are you thinking about?" Quinn asked, noticing her expression. "Just that I'm really happy right now." He set down his plate and pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Me too." They spent the night talking, kissing, eventually falling asleep on the couch wrapped around each other. Tessa woke up to early morning light and Quinn's steady breathing, and felt a contentment she hadn't known she was missing. But of course, reality had to intrude eventually. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Tessa was working the register when a woman walked in, tall and elegant in a designer suit, her dark hair perfectly styled. She browsed for a few minutes, then approached the counter with a book Tessa hadn't even seen her pick up. "Is this any good?" the woman asked. "It's excellent," Tessa said. "One of my favorites from last year. I'll take it then." The woman handed over her credit card and Tessa processed the transaction. As she was bagging the book, the woman spoke again. "You're Tessa, aren't you?" Tessa looked up sharply. "Yes. Do we know each other?" "Not yet." "I'm Natalie Harper. I work with Quinn." "Oh." Tessa wasn't sure what to say to that. "It's nice to meet you, likewise. Quinn talks about you quite a bit." "He does?" Natalie's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "He does. Look, I'm going to be direct because I think you deserve that. Quinn is a good man, but his world is complicated. There are expectations, pressures that someone outside that world can't really understand. I've seen him date before, and it never works out because the gap is too wide." Tessa felt her stomach clench. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I like Quinn and I don't want to see him get hurt. Or you, for that matter. You seem nice. But this thing between you two, it's not sustainable. Eventually, the differences will become too much." I think that's for Quinn and me to decide, Tessa said, keeping her voice steady despite the anger rising in her chest. Of course, I'm just offering perspective. Natalie took her bag. Enjoy the rest of your day. Tessa watched her leave, her hands shaking slightly. Marcus appeared from the back room, concern written across his face. What was that about? I don't know. She works with Quinn. She basically told me I'm not good enough for him. That's ridiculous. You're amazing. Am I, though? She's right that we're from different worlds. Maybe I've been kidding myself. Tessa, don't let some random woman get in your head. Quinn clearly cares about you. But the seed of doubt had been planted. When Quinn texted her that evening to make plans, Tessa found herself being short, her responses clipped. He noticed immediately. Is everything okay? He texted. Fine, just tired. You want me to come over? Not tonight. Rain check. There was a pause before his response. Of course. Get some rest. Tessa spent the evening spiraling, replaying Natalie's words over and over. She thought about the restaurant Quinn had taken her to, the private movie theater, the casual way he'd mentioned his last acquisition was worth hundreds of millions. She thought about her tiny apartment, her minimum wage job, the student loans she was still paying off. What did she really have to offer someone like Quinn? By the time Quinn showed up at her door the next evening, unannounced, Tessa had worked herself into a state. We need to talk, he said, his expression serious. I know, Tessa replied, letting him in. They sat on her couch, the same one where he'd first explained how to turn off a water valve. It felt like a lifetime ago. You're pulling away, Quinn said without preamble. I need to know why. Someone came into the bookstore yesterday, Natalie Harper. She said she works with you. Quinn's jaw tightened. What did she say? That we're from different worlds, that it won't work out, that I should probably save us both the trouble and end it now. Natalie had no right to say any of that to you. But is she wrong? Tessa asked, her voice breaking slightly. Quinn, I've been thinking about this. Your life, it's so different from mine. You have houses and cars and people who work for you. I live in a fourth-floor walk-up and worry about making rent. How is this supposed to work long-term? Quinn took her hands in his grip firm. Tessa, look at me. None of that matters. Do you think I care about the size of your apartment or what you do for a living? Maybe you should. People will talk. Your business associates, your family. They'll wonder what you're doing with someone so ordinary. You are not ordinary, Quinn said fiercely. You're brilliant and kind and you make me laugh. You see me, Tessa. Not my bank account or my company or my connections. You see me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? But Natalie said, Natalie is bitter because I turned down her advances last year and she's never gotten over it. She has no say in my personal life, and after this, she won't have a place in my professional life either. You can't fire someone because of me. Watch me. Tessa, I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I already have, and I don't give a damn what anyone else thinks about it. Tessa felt tears prick at her eyes. You love me? Yes. Is that okay? I love you too, she whispered. I'm just scared. This is all so new and so intense and I don't want to mess it up. Quinn pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. You're not going to mess it up. We'll figure it out together, okay? But you have to trust me, trust us. Okay, Tessa said against his chest. I'll try. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other. Eventually, Quinn pulled back enough to kiss her, gentle and reassuring. Tessa kissed him back, pouring all her fear and hope and love into it. Stay tonight, she said when they broke apart. Are you sure? I'm sure. They moved to her bedroom, and for the first time, Tessa let herself be completely vulnerable with him. It was tender and passionate and perfect, and afterward, lying tangled together in her sheets, Tessa felt the last of her doubts fade away. I meant what I said, Quinn murmured against her hair. I love you. I love you too, Tessa replied, and she'd never meant anything more. The next morning, Quinn made them breakfast while Tessa got ready for work. It was domestic and sweet, him moving around her tiny kitchen in his dress pants and nothing else, flipping pancakes like he did this every day. Tessa watched from the doorway, her heart so full it ached. "What?" Quinn asked, noticing her staring. "Nothing, just memorizing this. Good, because I plan on doing this a lot more." Things shifted after that night. They were still in different worlds, but they built a bridge between them. Quinn started spending more time at Tessa's apartment, showing up after work still in his suit, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. Tessa kept a drawer of his clothes in her dresser, and Quinn kept a shelf of her favorite books at his place. 2 months later, Tessa met Quinn's sister, Victoria, who was visiting from London. She was warm and funny and immediately put Tessa at ease. "So you're the woman who reformed my brother," Victoria said over dinner at Quinn's place. "I have to say, I didn't think anyone could get through to him. He's been married to his work for years." "I don't know about reformed," Tessa said, laughing. "He still works constantly." "But he's happy," Victoria observed. "I haven't seen him this relaxed in years. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Quinn's parents were harder. They invited him and Tessa to dinner at their estate, a sprawling property with actual grounds and staff. Tessa felt completely out of her element in her best dress, which still looked shabby compared to Mrs. Quinlan's designer ensemble. "So, Tessa," Mrs. Quinlan said over appetizers. "Quinn tells us you work in a bookstore." "Yes, madam. Brightside Books, I love it." "How quaint. And do you have plans to pursue something more substantial, mother?" Quinn said sharply. "I'm just asking, dear. It's important to have ambition." "I think helping people find books they love is pretty substantial," Tessa said, keeping her voice pleasant. "Not everyone needs to run a corporation to have a fulfilling career." Mr. Quinlan, who'd been quiet until then, chuckled. "She's got you there, Dorothy. I like her, Quinn. She doesn't take any nonsense." The rest of the dinner went better, though Mrs. Quinlan remained cool. On the drive back, Quinn apologized. "My mother can be difficult. She has very specific ideas about what my life should look like. It's okay. I knew what I was getting into, dating a billionaire. Still, you shouldn't have to deal with that. Quinn, if I can't handle your mother's disapproval, how am I going to handle everything else that comes with being with you? I'm tougher than I look." He glanced at her, a smile tugging at his lips. "You're incredible, you know that." "I do okay." 6 months into their relationship, disaster struck. A business deal Quinn had been working on for over a year fell through spectacularly, costing his company millions and threatening several major partnerships. He became consumed with damage control, working 18-hour days, barely sleeping. Tessa tried to be supportive, bringing him meals at his office, but he was distant, stressed, snapping at her over small things. "Maybe I should just go," Tessa said one night after he'd barely acknowledged she was there. "You clearly have too much on your plate right now." "Maybe you should," Quinn said, not looking up from his laptop. Tessa felt like she'd been slapped. "Fine. Call me when you remember you have a girlfriend." She left, fighting tears in the elevator. She didn't hear from Quinn for 3 days, and every hour that passed felt like confirmation that Natalie had been right. Their worlds were too different. When things got hard, he retreated into his own sphere, shutting her out. On the 4th day, Quinn showed up at the bookstore looking exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes and his suit was rumpled. "Can we talk?" he asked. Tessa followed him outside, her arms crossed defensively. "What do you want, Quinn?" "To apologize. I was an ass. I got so caught up in trying to fix everything that I pushed you away, and that was wrong." "You didn't deserve that." "No, I didn't. I'm sorry. This deal, it was important, and when it collapsed, I felt like a failure. I've built my entire identity around being good at this, and suddenly I wasn't good enough. I didn't want you to see that." Quinn, I don't care if you fail at business. I care about you, but I can't be with someone who shuts me out every time things get hard. That's not a partnership. You're right. God, you're so right. I'm not used to leaning on anyone. I've always dealt with problems alone, but I don't want to do that anymore. I want to let you in. I need to let you in. Tessa felt her anger softening. I'm here for you, but you have to actually let me be here. You can't just freeze me out. I know, I'm sorry. Can we try again? I promise I'll do better. She looked at him, at the genuine remorse in his eyes, the exhaustion in his face, and felt her resolve crack. Come here. Quinn stepped forward and Tessa wrapped her arms around him. He held her tight, his face buried in her neck, and she felt him shaking slightly. It's going to be okay, she murmured. We'll figure it out. I love you, he said. I'm sorry I didn't say it enough this week. I love you too, even when you're being an idiot. He laughed, a broken sound, but a laugh nonetheless. They worked through it. Quinn made an effort to include her more in his life, explaining what was happening at work, asking for her perspective, even though she knew nothing about corporate acquisitions. Tessa learned to push back when he started withdrawing, refusing to let him shut her out. It wasn't always easy, but it got easier. A year into their relationship, Quinn took her back to the restaurant where they'd had their first real date. Tessa was confused when they were led to a private room instead of the main dining area. What's going on? She asked. I wanted privacy for this, Quinn said, suddenly looking nervous. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, dropping to one knee before Tessa could process what was happening. Tessa Summers, you walked into my life because of a wrong number and a broken pipe, and you changed everything. You make me laugh, you challenge me, you see the best in me even when I can't see it myself. I don't want to spend another day without knowing you'll be by my side. Will you marry me? Tessa's hands were shaking as she covered her mouth. Are you serious? Completely serious. I've never been more sure of anything. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, of course I'll marry you. Quinn stood, slipping the ring onto her finger before pulling her into a kiss. It was perfect, everything Tessa had dreamed of and more. I love you so much, Quinn said against her lips. I love you too, even though you're dramatic enough to rent out a private room for this. You deserve dramatic. They told their families, their friends. Marcus cried when Tessa showed him the ring at work, and Victoria flew in from London to celebrate. Mrs. Quinlan was surprisingly warm, pulling Tessa aside at the engagement party to apologize for her initial coldness. I was wrong about you, she said. Quinn is happier than I've ever seen him. Thank you for loving my son. The wedding was 6 months later, a relatively small affair at a vineyard outside the city. Tessa wore a simple white dress that made her feel like a princess, and Quinn cried when she walked down the aisle. They wrote their own vows, promising to support each other, to communicate, to never let their different worlds divide them. You fixed more than just my pipes that morning, Tessa said, her voice thick with emotion. You fixed something in me I didn't even know was broken. You made me believe in love, in partnership, in possibility. I can't wait to spend my life with you. Quinn's voice was rough when he spoke. I answered a wrong number and found everything I'd been looking for. You're my home, Tessa. My best friend, my partner, my love. I promise to choose you every single day for the rest of my life. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Their honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy, staying in small hotels and eating at local trattorias. Quinn spoke Italian, which Tessa found unfairly attractive, and they spent their days exploring ancient cities and their nights wrapped around each other. It was perfect. When they returned, they moved into a new place together, something between Tessa's tiny apartment and Quinn's warehouse. A brownstone in a quiet neighborhood with a garden and space for both of their lives. Tessa kept working at the bookstore, despite Quinn's offers to support her financially. She liked her job, liked her independence, and Quinn respected that. 2 years into their marriage, Tessa discovered she was pregnant. She told Quinn over dinner, watching his face transform from confusion to shock to pure joy. "We're having a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We're having a baby." Quinn came around the table and lifted her up, spinning her around despite her protests. "This is incredible. You're incredible. How are you feeling? Are you okay? What do you need?" "I need you to put me down before I throw up." He set her down gently, his hands resting on her still flat stomach. "There's a person in there. A very small person, yes. I love you both so much." Tessa's pregnancy was relatively easy, all things considered. Quinn was impossibly attentive, reading every book on parenting he could find, baby-proofing the house months before it was necessary. He came to every doctor's appointment, his hand gripping hers when they found out they were having a girl. "A daughter," he said, looking stunned. "We're having a daughter." "You're going to be such a pushover," Tessa teased. "Absolutely. She's going to have me wrapped around her finger." Their daughter, Emma Rose Quinlan, was born on a sunny morning in May. She had Quinn's eyes and Tessa's dark hair, and she was perfect. Quinn cried when he held her for the first time, looking at Tessa with so much love it took her breath away. "Thank you," he said. "For her, for everything." "Thank you for answering your phone that morning," Tessa replied, smiling through her own tears. They settled into parenthood with the same teamwork they'd brought to their relationship. Quinn took paternity leave, working from home as much as possible to be with them. He was a natural father, patient and gentle, singing Emma to sleep with off-key lullabies that made Tessa fall in love with him all over again. On their third wedding anniversary, they went back to Tessa's old apartment building. It had been renovated, but her old unit was vacant. Quinn had bought the building 6 months earlier as an investment, though Tessa suspected it was more sentimental than financial. "Remember when I fixed your sink right here?" Quinn said, standing in the tiny kitchen. "I remember thinking you were the strangest plumber I'd ever met. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, even soaking wet in pajama pants." Smooth talker. Quinn pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I'd do it all again, every moment, every fight, every compromise, all of it." "Me too," Tessa said. "Even though you're still a terrible plumber." "Hey, that sink held up perfectly." "Lucky guess." They laughed, the sound echoing in the empty apartment. Outside, the city hummed with life. Thousands of people going about their days, making their own connections, finding their own love stories. But inside that small space, it was just them, remembering the beginning of theirs. 5 years later, they had a son, James, who inherited his father's business sense and his mother's love of stories. Quinn had stepped back from the day-to-day operations of his company, transitioning to a chairman role that allowed him more time with his family. Tessa had been promoted to manager of the bookstore, and she'd started writing her own novel, inspired by the improbable way she'd met her husband. On lazy Sunday mornings, they'd pile into bed together, the kids between them, and Quinn would read aloud from whatever book Emma had chosen. Tessa would watch her family, this beautiful life they'd built from a wrong number and a broken pipe, and feel grateful for every moment. "What are you thinking about?" Quinn asked one morning, noticing her expression. "Just that I'm really glad I wrote down that phone number wrong. Best mistake you ever made." "Second best," Tessa corrected. "The best was saying yes when you asked me to breakfast. That wasn't a mistake. That was destiny." "You don't believe in destiny. I believe in us." Emma tugged on Quinn's shirt. "Daddy, keep reading. I want to know what happens next." "Me too, sweetheart," Quinn said, winking at Tessa. "Me too." He continued reading, his voice steady and warm, while Tessa leaned against his shoulder and their children listened with rapt attention. Outside, life continued, but in their small bubble of happiness, everything was exactly as it should be. Years passed in a blur of school plays and business meetings, family vacations and quiet nights at home. Quinn's company continued to thrive under his strategic oversight, but he never let it consume him the way it had before Tessa. Emma grew into a thoughtful teenager with her mother's love of literature and her father's analytical mind. James was creative and bold, always building something new. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Tessa back to the diner where they'd had their first breakfast together. It was still there, still serving the same menu, and they ordered French toast and eggs just like they had that first morning. "Remember when I thought you were a plumber?" Tessa said, laughing. "Remember when you tried to pay me in breakfast? Best investment I ever made." Quinn reached across the table, taking her hand. "I know I don't say this enough, but thank you for taking a chance on me, for fighting for us when it got hard, for building this life with me. Quinn, I'd choose you 1,000 times over, in any universe, any timeline, any situation. You're it for me. You're it for me too." They kissed across the table, not caring who was watching, two people completely in love after 10 years of marriage and a lifetime still ahead of them. When they got home that night, the kids had made them a banner that read "Happy Anniversary" with handprints and glitter. The house was a mess. There were dishes in the sink, and the dog was barking at something in the yard. It was chaotic and imperfect and absolutely perfect all at once. "This is a good life," Tessa said, surveying the beautiful disaster around them. "The best life," Quinn agreed, pulling her close. "All because you dialed the wrong number, and you answered." "I'll always answer," Quinn said softly. "For you, I'll always answer." They stood there in their entryway, holding each other while their children laughed in the next room and the evening light filtered through the windows. It wasn't the life either of them had planned, but it was better than anything they could have imagined. A wrong number had led to a right love, and that love had built something that would last forever. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the money or the status or the different worlds they'd come from. Just love, commitment, and the willingness to keep choosing each other every single day. From a broken pipe to a beautiful life, from strangers to soulmates, from a wrong number to forever right. And they lived happily ever after.